presenting a Chrome window, and this is social movements and change. Okie dokie. And here's the final exam review. All right. Okay. So let me see if I can figure out where the beginning is here. Let me see. Back to key concepts. And okay, Emily, ABCD is mobilization. Okay, looking at mobilization, right? Sympathy pool, right? People who are sympathetic to the movement might join. And again, remember, try to think back. If Emily wants to add to this, or if some of you want to kind of throw in as you study some examples of sympathy pools, or like articles where we see sociologists talking about this stuff, right? So the sympathy pool, for example, kind of became an issue with the apartheid protests at Columbia University, and I'm blanking on a name there right now who wrote that article. But remember that potentially all those students were sympathetic to the anti-apartheid cause, but the issue is always how do you move them out of the sympathy pool in that I'm still not that big a fan of the word mobilize. It's too much of a warlike term or something for me. But how do you get people mobilized out of the sympathy pool? How do you actually make them into participants, right? So they join, or as Emily points out, right, donate money to the movement. And there were those kind of quirky factors that they identified in the Columbia movement that got people out of the sympathy pool and into actually doing things. Biographical ability, right? Good. So in certain groups, having more biographically available, being right college students and the retired, and that's why we see, and again, you can apply it to a lot of different things. McAdam talked a lot about that. I think McAdam really originates the term in his study of the Freedom Riders. So many of them were college students, but then you also see that popping up in things like the participation of Salvadoran women in the FMLN, right? The ones who were young and in shape to fight, but didn't have babies yet, right? That's a biographical availability. Right, beliefs and ideology being important to whether people participate in, and also, of course, you might want to sort of relate that back to framing and think about this as part of the challenge of social movements is to craft and shape beliefs and ideology. And then social networks, of course, right? It's important. Who is important. And then, okay, and again, as always, hop in the voice or in the text chat if you've got questions. What am I looking at now? I'm going to go back to the, that's so weird. Can I do this? There we go. All right, cool. Yes, tests EFGH membership in organizations through social mobility here. And that's kind of helpful too, right? A little signpost for you all to the pages in the book where this stuff is, and I think I said before, but to reiterate, of course the exam is open book and open notebook, but I don't certainly expect you to directly quote from the texts, unless you really feel like it, or to give page citations, anything like that. But yeah, that's again, open book, open notebook, and just don't try to collaborate with each other. Okay, so e-membership, right? Okay, this is kind of interesting arrangement here, right? So the more integrated people are, right? So what's more likely to make people more likely to be members? And also, right, just the fact that membership in organizations per se is more likely to get people mobilized, right? And so these organizations include things like pre-existing networks, but also remember, organizations like church groups, again, in McAdam, that kind of thing. So other formal organizations, NGOs, or churches, or PTAs, those kinds of things. So being a member will make you more likely be organized, right? Having a personal identity that's related to a movement is important. Yeah, the radical women's movement is a great example there, right? And so that, and also we saw in the LGBTQ rights movement, that in fact in some movements, changing collective identities is almost the goal of the movement. Previous experience, right? Those who, sorry. Excuse me. Those who have previously participated are more likely to participate in the future, and of course, they actually gain skills, right? So again, Tess uses the radical women's movement as a good example there, and this was, I don't know, I guess I focus on McAdam too much, but McAdam, one of his points about the Freedom Riders was that subsequently they engaged in a lot. If we go way back to talk about Occupy, like that's one of the possible positive outcomes of Occupy Wall Street in particular, being that those people gained this experience. And then, right, social media, right, contributing to large turnouts for sure, but also remember my kind of caveats along the way, and even some of the caveats that we've seen, about how traditional modes to mobilization are still really important. So face-to-face networks are still really important in mobilizing people. Okay, then this is actually sort of working in order, or just happening to work in order. Okay, so Sarah dealt with free riders, right? Remember those free riders, and these are, so I tried to sort of organize. It's a little harder to see on the document with your names on it. Hopefully a little easier to see on the document without your names on it. Some of these are kind of nested, right? So free rider is related to public good and selective incentives, right? So to get over the free rider problem, you want those selective incentives that are available only to members of the movement. Stickers and bags, good. Good, right? This equation is from Viterna, and we get the page citation there as well. That's helpful, right? So just, why do people, or what makes it more probable that people will participate in high risk activities? So you got to be networked, but you got to overcome biographical barriers like age, income, children, right? Good. And emotional benefits, right? So Wood talked about that, right? In El Salvador, but okay, good. Yeah. Also, you got the Gould, right? The emotional habitus in ACT UP. And remember this. This we didn't hit on a ton of articles like this because this is kind of fairly cutting edge stuff in movement studies. But there has to be, or increasingly, we're certainly thinking about emotional benefits as something that gets people mobilized, right? Okay, then, here it is. Okay, final exam review. And then Eliza talked about political solidarity, right? Consciousness raising, good, right? You can't solve a problem through institutions, developing a commitment to the cause. Right, great example of the women's rights movement, right? So raising consciousness, understanding that things need to be done through a social movement, the sense of collective empowerment. Good. Remember that these particular terms, this set of four terms, comes from that Columbia University anti-apartheid protests article, and the name again, I'm blanking, but Eliza gives some great examples from other stuff here as well, right? So when people feel empowered, they're more likely to engage, right? So the peasants engaging in protests, and I'm sorry, I was just amazed there are human beings on the campus. It's unusual. Polarization, right? So I actually would say yeah, this is good actually, right? So PETA does kind of come to mind because of their sort of polarizing tactics, but also remember with the with the Columbia protests, I think we see this in the South African case as well, even within South Africa, when the powers that be respond very harshly or repressively to a movement, that can be polarizing and cause people who were sort of on the fence to jump in with the movement. And collective decision making. Yeah, well, and here too, it doesn't. Collective decision making doesn't have to be a feature of movements as well. This is just something that was posited as really important, in particular in the Columbia student movement. I posit it as a real problem for Occupy Wall Street, where everybody sort of gets together to well, and that's the thing is really it's not so much the decisions made for the group and individuals don't have a say. It's that all the individuals do have a say in collective decision making, and so like the whole group talks, and so instead of having like a real top down decision making structure, it's I guess grassroots, right? It's from everybody, which gains a lot of buy-in in certain cases, but in certain cases, again, as with Occupy Wall Street, it's just like chaotic, and you can't if you're trying to keep everybody happy, then you end up really potentially diluting the cause. Okay, then turning to movement outcomes, Linnea was assigned to this, and she's still in bed in Wisconsin. No, I don't know what's going on. With Linnea, are you there? Are you there? You're not there. You're not there today. Okay. But just remember with movement outcomes, and again, this is pretty clearly laid out in the textbook, right? That you can have anything from a total failure to at least you made a group to you structurally changed society, and then there's also on here there's cultural outcomes where you can change sort of the culture of the thing, the way people perceive things. Again, ACT UP is a kind of good example there, where you had sort of a different understanding of the meaning of AIDS, HIV, so that's a real significant cultural change. And individual level outcomes as well are this sort of thing of like movements can turn people into activists and can really have an important effect on people's life histories. Okay, Maddie did other things with outcomes, right? So legacy and movement strategy factors. Okay, cool. So legacies, right? So things like enduring infrastructures, right? Organization, experience, right? So, it just, again, overall, the point here being that, even a movement that may not seem successful you know, builds a particular sort of infrastructure that might be important in the future. You know, or a successful movement does that as well, right? So the civil rights movement, Maddie points out here, you know, leads to the continued existence of the NAACP, which, you know, continues the movement in other ways. Movement strategy factors, right? So different kinds of things that predict whether or not a movement is successful. And of course, we call back to framing here, and the disruptive novel tactics, right? You know, and maybe I'm not sure how much I went into that, but, you know, to kind of think about, you know, what is a conventional tactic. I mean, a conventional tactic is things like voting, or like you know, lobbying your congressman, or those kind of things, you know, that are really kind of sanctioned by the law and by the culture. And these disruptive tactics are these things that you know, that are unconventional, that lie outside that. So protests, right? You're opening up space for bargaining power, or yeah, okay, you're good. Yeah, so sit-ins, right? Disrupting people's routines, or right, Earth first, right? Just destroying stuff. I mean, yes, clearly that's disruptive, right? And it can get people's attention, and open up that space where you might make the elites negotiate with you. Okay, I know Katie got in a little bit late today. I don't know, were you able to get something on there? Not yet. Okay, that's cool. You know, and of course, can always be useful to add to these later on and edit. But Katie, if you could get something up, that would be you know, great, helpful for everybody here. Arden took on environmental issues and Lulus, right? So EJ, right? So generally, right, challenging toxic facilities. You know, and this relates closely to the term environmental racism that you may have heard. You know, so politically or economically marginalized communities, you know, facing threats like coal burning plants, right? So responding to that. Yes, so right, trying to get rid of those facilities or prevent new ones from coming in place, good. And so then, right, the locally unwanted land use is the sort of way they specify this, Lulus, right? And so good, yeah, power plants, landfills, prisons, factories, and mines. Although scarily enough, people like prisons. In there a lot of the time nowadays. You'd think you don't want a prison around. A lot of rural communities actually advocate for prisons, but that's an aside, right? Lobbying, good, right? Individuals or organizations trying to influence government action. Again, if you can stomach Tiger King, you can watch how Carol Baskin was pushing for this big cat something act, and apparently the film has actually pushed that back onto the agenda, oddly enough. And good, yes, what is the global south, right? Anything outside those industrialized democracies. Yeah, and we do have, right, these good examples here. Okay, that is all the time we have for today. So if I could, I would go on. Tia, Chloe, Lena, and Nicole all have, I'm sure, some good things down here. So again, the exam will be posted and available on Thursday, and you'll have you know, until like midnight to complete that. It'll be a couple of essays. Do I have a second to chat after class? I do. And what? Yeah. And if you have other questions, you know, please feel free, shoot me an email. And it's been a great pleasure working with you all. Good luck on your exam and your other exams, and I hope to see you all on campus in the fall, or for this. I hope we're able to do this December graduation thing that they're talking about. So I'll hope to see you then, and enjoy your summer and stay healthy and all that good stuff. Yes, and I will stick around for a second. I guess Nicole has some questions, or if anybody else has questions, please just let me know.
All right. Bye. Thank you, Professor.
Okay, take care. Bye. Yes, Nicole, what do you got?
How are you doing?
Hey.
My question is regarding the credit, no credit option thing.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, when are you planning on getting to, I guess, the paper?
Yeah, the paper. I should be looking at the paper today. And so I've got somebody else also at the top of my list. So you'll be second on my list if you want me.
At this point, anything below an A- would really drop my GPA. So I'm kind of about it like in a good way. I'm also trying to apply to law school next year. So I know they don't really particularly love to see credit, no credit. So
I think I've heard this going around though, and I really think that people are going to be a lot more. I mean, obviously depends on the school and whatever. But and I used to review a lot of graduate applications. I can't imagine that this won't be just like across the board. Like, if you're taking credit, no credit, and it's 2020, they're going to see that, for the next 10 years or so, they're going to remember like.
It's just somebody sent out a very intimidating email.
Somebody said what?
Somebody sent out a very intimidating email, just saying like grad schools don't like to see pass fail. So that was my only drawback. But I figured anything is going to be very lenient when it comes to this. Yeah.
I mean, in normal times, I would absolutely say, grad schools don't like pass fail, but especially with law schools where they're looking at LSAT so much too. I wouldn't be super exercised about it, but I'll definitely try to get back to you as soon as I can with the case study.
Okay, I should hold off on doing credit, no credit for this.
For the moment, yeah.
Okay.
But I'm happy to sign off on that, of course.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep. All righty. Take care.
Bye.